Joining me now, State Senator, Northern Virginia Democrat, Fairfax, man of the hour, Chap Petersen. Senator Petersen, you're getting a lot of love from a lot of people. Great to have you.
Well, John, I thank you for saying that. I'm healthy and upright, and thanking God for giving me another day. So yeah, I'm here and glad to be on your show. Thank you for continuing forward to give people information and help us continue to debate these issues in this great democracy we call Virginia. So thanks.
Thank you, Chap. And I got to say it. I never thought I'd say it, but your beard's growing on me. I like it. I really do. There's something about it that is, I don't know, it's Jeffersonian or something, but there was a few photos of you that were captured where you were impassioned with the beard going, and I'm like, I kind of like that look. I didn't think I would, but I did. Look, we got a lot of politics to talk to, but
sure.
I am so sick of politics. Can we take 5 minutes and talk about the draft?
Yes.
I just got to talk about something else. So your Redskins, they get number 2 pick.
Right.
I'm not going to give you my opinion until you give me yours, because I don't want to. But they draft Ohio State defensive end Chase Young with their pick, 22 years old. Now I'm thinking of this defensive front you've got. Right, you got a couple first rounders in there. You got Jonathan Allen.
Right.
You got Monty Sweat. You got Darren Payne. You got Ryan Kerrigan.
Right.
Now you put in this guy Chase Young. This fella's a beast.
Yeah, he's the real deal. He's a big kid. He's from Upper Marlboro, Maryland, which is PG County, actually close to the FedEx Stadium. Athletic. Let me just throw 2 words out at you, and that's Lawrence Taylor. And when Lawrence Taylor joined the Giants in '80, and I remember this as a kid, it turned that franchise around. They went from being just the dregs of the NFC East to being a fearsome team that went on to win a couple Super Bowls in the '80s, and Taylor was just the spiritual and physical head of that team. And I love Ryan Kerrigan, but I think even Ryan would admit he's on the backside of his career. And we've had other talented players, but we haven't really had the one standout. And this kid can be a standout. I mean, he can be someone who just changes the entire front. And how are we going to get the ball into the end zone is anybody's guess this year. But I like the pick. When I had a chance to have dinner with Ron Rivera back in January. He came down to Richmond, and we just talked football. He had no interest in politics, which I appreciated. And he told me at that time that Chase Young was a, quote, generational talent, and he was planning on putting him on the team. And here we are.
I think he's going to make a huge difference. And that defensive front, look, a lot of people like Rivera feel when you're building a football team and you've had some tough times, you got to stop the other team and you got to stop on the ground. You look at this front, and I was thinking about it last night when I made the pick, and I was thinking about, remember the Purple People Eaters?
Yeah, there were the old Minnesota Vikings, Alan Page, Carl Eller, Jim Marshall. Yeah, great team.
And then remember the Rams? They had what they called the Fearsome Foursome. I know we're dating
Merlin
ourselves.
Olsen.
Yeah. God, who could get on the air and remember the Fearsome Foursome?
Fearsome Foursome. Merlin Olsen, Deacon Jones. Yeah, all kinds of people.
I mean, you had a lot of, and then the Steelers, they had that line anchored by Mean Joe Green.
Yep, Mean Joe Green.
So you look at a lot of these, and the Rams never were that. I mean, they never won a bunch of Super Bowls, but they were always in the playoffs with Roman Gabriel. But they didn't score a lot, right? They had Chuck Knox.
Yeah, they were very conservative. You have a good memory, yeah.
Isn't it sad how I remember all this stuff that doesn't matter? It's like it's meaningless information.
You know what? It's funny, John. I went back a few days ago. Obviously, we've all got more time than we need, and I went and rewatched the Redskins beating Dallas in the '82 conference championship at RFK, and it literally brought tears to my eyes. No, Joe Theismann was our quarterback.
Oh, Theismann.
It was the year we won the Super Bowl, and we handed the ball to Riggins 38 times that game. That's all we did. We just handed the ball to Riggins, and then Manley had a couple sacks, we had a couple turnovers, and we won by a touchdown or two. But it was a different era of football. I mean, the ball was just, you gave it to Riggins every down, and the crowd was going nuts the entire time. You literally could barely hear the announcers. I mean, what a day that was.
It was, yeah, and that's like old school. That's kind of what my Titans do now is just hand the football off. They
Yeah.
picked the big offensive. They had this great offensive line. They lost Kelly, one of their players, to free agency. They should have protected him. They did a bad move, but they picked this big offensive lineman from Ohio State. So I think it was a good pick for them. Look, you got to go what's going to help you win, right?
Yeah.
Tennessee is, Ryan Tannehill is not going to throw for 350
No,
yards.
he's not.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
so you got to run the football, take advantage of what you have. And
I loved Vrabel as a coach. I thought Tennessee had a great year. I really like their trajectory right now. So you should be pleased as a fan.
We're excited if there's going to be football.
I'm working on my next op-ed, and my next op-ed is kind of getting back to normalcy and laying down some markers on what normalcy is. And when does, we're going through this pandemic and the trajectory of it and what are acceptable levels of sickness or not. And at some point, you have to lay down some markers, and one of them is going to be, what about school? We called off school. We shut down. The colleges were pretty much the first ones to shut down. They've shut down all their summer programs. The public schools fell in line, and you're going to come up against fall semesters pretty soon. Your registration's already beginning for summer school, and that's going to be pretty much online, it looks like. And then you're going to have registration for the fall semester. And is anyone going to give an all clear? Is anyone going to say, all safe? Probably not. And you're going to have to make a decision. Same thing with the NFL. I mean, look, at the end of the day, if the NBA season goes away, I don't think that, obviously there's people that are NBA advocates, and I don't want to make them mad, but that's not a cultural.
No one cares. I mean, that's the bottom line, right?
Yeah,
NBA goes away.
It's not something you set your calendar by.
Exactly. And I mean, look.
But for me,
right.
You're probably the same way. Once Labor Day comes around, it's football time. And I've got, maybe 25, 30 years on this earth. And, going to games and taking my kids to games and watching my son play for Fairfax High School, that to me, those are life experiences that I'm not going to let go of easily. And so, that's just, as I said, at some point we need to lay down markers.
Well, hopefully a couple of governors are going to do that. Doubtful our governor is going to do anything. And I don't want to get there in that debate right now. I'm not a fan. But let me just ask you this.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking about this. My son's a baseball player. He kind of skated by this year. No high school baseball, but he's working out. I built him a gym in his house, works out 3 times a week, takes baseball practice, does all the things he has to do. But he was a freshman. He was going to get limited playing time varsity ball, so it didn't matter.
Sure.
A lot of these seniors, though, getting ready for high school football practice, I mean, people grow a lot between 16 and 18, 17 and 18. So the college scholarships come as a senior. They don't come in football as a junior like they do in baseball or sophomore. They come as a senior. So you eliminate high school football. I mean, you're talking about across the country, Chap, tens of thousands of players that have worked their entire maybe from their 10 years old up to get a football scholarship, and they have nowhere to play or showcase themselves.
Yeah, you're going to have that issue about recruiting, and again, we're looking through a pretty narrow lens in football. Obviously, we could expand it to every sport, but the other thing is in college, football season and the revenue from football supports athletic departments across the board, and that's how you put a lot of sports, you put them out there. And if you don't have that revenue, if you don't have that TV revenue, particularly for Power 5 schools and even for schools like Madison or William and Mary, that they get good crowds, and it's going to be really devastating on athletic department budgets. And
so what are you guys going to do? Are you going to let football practice commence in July, or is Northam and these other governors just going to go on with this extensions in perpetuity?
Well, I think things are going to come to a head pretty quickly, and I think one of the things is the weather. Right now it's been kind of rainy and cold this week. Obviously, it was a beautiful day on Wednesday, but as soon as it starts warming up, it's going to be going harder and harder to justify keeping people in place. And that's one thing. The other thing is you're already seeing lawsuits getting filed, and I think we've gone through stages of this pandemic. And I'll be honest, John, I was oblivious, and I will take responsibility for that. Back in January, February, everything that was going on in China, I was completely oblivious to it. We had so much going on in Richmond. And I actually first got clued into it in February. My wife and I, her family lives in Korea, and we had planned to visit them for years. We hadn't been over there as a family since 2009. So we had been planning this spring to take a trip, and I actually bought the tickets in early February, which almost immediately people said that was a bad idea. And, by late February, I started to get updates that you can't travel to the Far East because of the pandemic. So that was kind of the first time this was even on my radar screen. Well, we had a briefing from the governor's staff and Dan Carey, and they did a very good job. This was probably, I'm going to say, first Saturday in March. So we were barely into March, and it was all about travel advisories and washing your hands, and it was pretty limited, and I was still, again, oblivious. And it really wasn't till probably March 10th or 11th, after we had adjourned, and then we had to come back for the budget. And I remember I had tickets to the Caps game that night, which I was excited about because they were catching fire, and I hadn't gone to an ice hockey game all year. And then I got a text that March Madness had canceled, which just blew me away. I'm like, what do you mean they canceled? I'd never heard of such a thing. Mm-hmm. And then, I got a note after that the Caps had canceled their match. And I suddenly, for the first time, I was like, okay, this is serious. And like everybody else, I started watching the briefings with Dr. Fauci, and the governor's team was doing their, Monday, Wednesday, Friday briefings, and I was listening to that and taking down notes and sending out newsletters to my constituents. And I think we were all on the same page through, probably the first few weeks, certainly into early April. And then it became apparent that this thing was not going away anytime soon, that the numbers were kind of extending, that we had certain populations. We had this terrible situation in nursing homes and long-term daycare centers where you had dozens of people dying, and just tragic. And then on the flip side, we had canceled school, which I got to be honest, kind of took me aback, that we would just cancel school for the year and do it in what I thought was kind of a very quick fashion. And I think as we got sort of into April and deeper into April, it's like, well, hold on. Everyone talked about flattening the curve, and if we flatten the curve, then you're pushing the curve further down the road. I mean, by definition, what could have been a 60-day process becomes a 180-day process or a 360-day process. And if that's the case, well, then how are we going to function? We're going to have a court system? Are we going to have a school system? Are we going to have an economic system? And nobody was stepping forward with those answers. And, I've sort of, John, I've debated about this in my own mind. I had a piece that I wrote for the Roanoke Times, which I wrote it, I tore it up, I wrote it again, because I want to be positive, and I want to be supportive of the administration. As you know, I've known Ralph Northam a long time, and he's someone that I've trusted his judgment. And he is a physician. But at some point, look, this is more than just making medical judgments. You're talking about millions of people's lives, and I'm in the commercial world every day. Most of my clients are small businesses. I represent restaurants. I represent auto shops. I represent, businesses making between $500,000 to $5 million a year, which are sort of at the very heart of the small business community. And I've got people all over the place that are been shut down, and they're going to be filing bankruptcy, and they're not coming back. And this is alarming to me. Now, again, I'm not in the hospital. I know my cousin works in the hospital, and I have so much affection and just admiration for her. But I've got to worry about everybody, and I'm concerned that I still don't see any type of vision for where are we going with this. And if this is going to be, if we have, quote-unquote, flattened the curve such that this is going to be with us for the next few months, few years, then what's the long-term plan? And I think everyone sort of assumed that this social distancing was the right answer, but it really just, in my opinion, it deferred the issue. It didn't address the issue. And as best I can tell, John, and I've tried to read every academic journal that I can, and I wasn't halfway smart enough to go to medical school, but there's two different ways you can address a pandemic. One is you come up with a vaccine, and I know we've got the best scientists working on that. And the second is eventually you just develop herd immunity. And we've got, some societies, I know Sweden is basically doing that, in which you let people just go ahead and be exposed to it, and it passes through their body, and then from that point forward, that eventually you reach a level of immunity. And so that's the the fork in the road that we're at. And if someone was to make a very compelling argument saying, Chap, here's why herd immunity is not going to work, and here's why social distancing is the best option, I'm all ears. And it's not about my business. It's not about even what's right in the short term. I'm willing to take, and I think I can say for everyone in the Democratic caucus, in the Republican caucus, because we've had some very candid conversations about this, if it means, having a terrible second, third quarter, if it means, having a state economy that goes down the tubes for 90 days, 120, 180 days, and that's what it takes, fine. But at some point, you got to be able to say that's what it is. You can't. This is not an indefinite situation, and that's my issue with what we're doing right now.
So basically, no end game. You and I have the same position, no end game. That, quite frankly, that's why I'm going to Georgia next week. Brian Kemp decided he was going to manufacture an end game. Simple. He was going to open everything up, and there's no guidelines. I mean, I talked to a mayor in Roswell, Georgia yesterday who's going to be on my show, I think Monday or Tuesday, Lori Henry, long friend of mine, know her for 3 decades. Ann knows her. Now she's the mayor. And she's like, well, I'm upset about this because, the governor issued no guidelines. And I'm like, okay, so let me get this straight. Now we're sitting around waiting for a central planning committee to tell you, like, how many feet to put a table in a restaurant, or what lane in a bowling alley you can have odd and even numbers. I mean, well, here's what Brian Kemp said. You guys will figure it out. I got smart residents. I got smart business owners. You'll figure it out. You'll just figure it out together. Everybody kind of knows now, wear a mask, wear gloves, wash your hands, right. Social distancing. But there's other evidence now suggesting that social distancing is actually hurting our recovery, that you're better off going outside and being exposed to the air and being exposed to people with herd immunity, like you said. So, facts, and, there's 3 studies out now, Chap, Stanford, USC, New York City, suggesting that the mortality rate, those people dying from COVID-19, is going to be 1.01 to 0.02%, which is the same as the, natural influenza.
Right.
And then the other issue you've got is in New York City, which is the hotspot of all hotspots, the epidemic, there's not a single death under 21. So then you have to say, why are we closing schools?
Well,
you have zero deaths under 21.
That's actually
zero.
The op-ed I'm working on, John, because this is what's frustrating to me is that we need to learn from this. And I'm not saying the decision to close a school was necessarily wrong. I just think it was done too quickly, and here's why. We're learning. And if this had been a pandemic that was affecting children, I would have a radically different response right now, okay? And I'm not saying one life is more valuable than another, but the children, they're the ones that are least able to protect themselves. They're put into situations where they can't control their own destiny. And my worry is that you're right. I mean, I have our own statistics in Virginia that of the COVID illnesses, not the deaths, only 3% are children. Okay, so you're talking about an extremely small percentage of just the illnesses, and I'll accept what you say about the deaths. But the point is that we need to have them getting educated. We need to have them out, going through structured activities. They need to be exercising. They need to be out and about. And I don't see how closing the schools is helping us get to a solution here. And I understand that, yes, children can, potentially become carriers, and that's something we need to talk about if they become, infected themselves. But we also need to realize we're learning from the statistics, and this has to be a response based on reason and science. And there's reason and science is saying the children are not, they are at a minimum far less susceptible to this. And we need to work that into a response and think of a way that we can, again, re-engage them in the school system and not just treat a 5-year-old like an 85-year-old. That makes no sense at all.
No sense. We can all go back and say, we took precautionary measures. I think everybody got the, shelter in place, don't go out, social distancing, close everything down. We flooded the zone with trillions of dollars, and a lot of it being stolen by the big banks and public companies. That's separate, another topic. But we flooded the zone. We went through all this because no one knew. But now the numbers are coming out. Now we know. No one under 18. New York City, which represents 1/3 of the total people dead with COVID-19, 1/3. Not a single person under 18 has died. Not a single person under 18 has been in the hospital over 3 days. Okay? This is data. You look at Virginia, you look at the governor yesterday extending non-elective surgeries for another week. Not one reporter said to him, what numbers do you have to base that on? Here's the numbers in Virginia. 372 people have died. Last year, same time for the flu, 1,813 people died. We have 373 people died. We have 5,800 COVID beds set aside. That's what VHHA says.
Right.
We've got 1,700 people in the hospital. That means there are 4,000 beds empty. Here's data. Of all the ventilators that we have in Virginia, 22% are being utilized, 78% are open. So here's the other data we have. Hospitals in Virginia have losing $650 million a month. Here's the other data we have. Hospitals are furloughing non-medical workers all over the state. Right. So what data do you have that says we can't replace our knee for another week based on what data? All the data, it says the opposite. Here's the problem, Chap. We all want to work together, but you look at the numbers and it becomes political. And that's the problem that Ralph Northam has got right now. He can't defend any of these decisions based on his own numbers.
Well,
so now it's like, why are we still closed? Why are businesses closed until May 8th? Then here's the other problem. There's not a single business owner in Virginia, Chap, that I talked to who is faced with bankruptcy that has any confidence that May 8th is a hard date. That's the other issue.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, you're going to reopen a business, you got to have employees there. Are you going to call employees and say and put them back on your payroll? I mean, you need to plan ahead of time to open a business. You need to get those employees. You need to put them back on your payroll. You need to check with your payroll processors to get all the correct deductions made. I mean, you can't just snap your fingers and do it. And again, this is my frustration that we haven't set. We've put these dates out there, which are not, in my opinion, and again, I'm just speaking, but they're not based on science. They're arbitrary. And we need to, again, look, I don't want to be, I want everyone to be on the same team. Don't get me wrong. Okay. Mm-hmm. And we have been, but at some point, you've got to go back and, like you said, revisit these decisions now that we have data. In regard to the hospitals, it's funny that you talk to the Hospital Association. Well, I talked to Sean Connaughton of the Hospital Association last week, before I put my editorial in the Roanoke Times. And the thing that triggered it to me was I represent one of the largest hospital doctor groups in Northern Virginia, and they've been having financial issues. Mm-hmm. Which was very odd to me. I thought they'd be super busy. Mm-hmm. And then I got a call from a person, I won't reveal their name, who was a pediatrician that had lost her job. Who ever heard of a pediatrician losing a job?
Unbelievable.
I mean, somebody with a medical degree, and they got laid off because nobody, there's no demand for these services right now. That doesn't make any sense to me. We got a million kids.
And that's the thing. When the governor made this decision yesterday, and I've been critical of almost every decision he's made in this pandemic, or whatever you want to call it, every single one he made, this was the worst because all the numbers suggested that he would get on TV or go to his press conference and say, elective surgery open. You need to replace a knee. You need to get rotator cuff surgery. Whatever it is you're in, go ahead. Instead, he extends it for a week. No metrics, no numbers, no data. Everything supporting the opposite. And you can only look at it, Chap, and say, okay, this is another political move because he's under pressure from his left-wing base, and I don't want to get into politics here, but there's no other conclusion that one can draw other than you've got Caucus of the Corn and his financial extreme liberal base demanding nothing open. I can't think of any other reason because the numbers no longer back it, Chap, Petersen. That's the problem he's got now. Numbers, data, nothing backs anything he's doing. That's why I'm going to Georgia next week to celebrate Governor Kemp's courage in opening up the state and doing exactly what you're saying. Here's the way forward. Get a bowling ball, pick a lane, bring your own shoes. That's it. Have supper.
All right,
Great
John.
day.
Well, listen, great to talk to you. There's so much to talk about, and again, I want to keep it, there's a lot to talk about, but I appreciate you having me on the show, and for everyone listening out there, be safe, and all I can say is, God willing, 30 days from now, 60 days from now, we've passed through this, and by whatever definition passing through this represents.
Right.
And we can look back and people can criticize the governor, people can criticize me, people can criticize you, but at least we're all back in a position that we're in semi-normalcy. That's all I'm asking for.